And what we can do is just run through, and people who are working on interesting things can just update on what's been up at their end. So Philip, do you want to go first? Just share a few updates from CRISPR Chimera.
Yeah, sure. So now you can run multiple instances of the same DHT and have like effectively different groups of people using the same app. So that means that each time, like in the chat app, right? If you add a new room of new people, that's a separate DHT, so that you've got that membrane and only those people get to see that data. So now all the apps allow you to select an instance. And all of that is going to have to be changed for the 2020 version because the way instance management is done is a bit different, but they're essentially the same concept. So you create a new group that actually installs a version of the DHT for you. That's all done. And I've now got a generic form control for when you create a new part. So by default, you get this view control that uses a schema file and it will create a form for you. So you don't have to custom write every single different entry type, which is kind of cool. So the part editor, the zone modeler, all that stuff is now all tied together really well with the instancing stuff with us. And so today, my goal is to basically finish off this first version, stabilize it and do some more documentation. Oh, that's right, I built a knowledge base app as well. So that's built into the app as well. So I've got to finish off profiles and personas today-ish and spend the rest of the week stabilizing, ready to get other people to come on board and start working on it.
Yeah, so for those watching this video, if you want to start playing with Philip's project, this is probably a good time to start tuning in. Yeah, this is really cool. I was just thinking about it. Like, Philip, is this because of COVID? Like, you're not out DJing, that you're able to spend more time working on CRISPR and Chimera?
Kind of, yeah. There is a bit of that. But I'm trying not to just work all the time because that just doesn't work. So I've been incessantly polishing my Harley and doing crazy stuff. Like I just change the stoplight tail light over to an old school Shure 55 microphone. So it looks fucking cool.
Who else has something to share? Sam or Lynn or Greg? Because Feli and Kamal will have some stuff. Armando, maybe you can share some of the stuff you've been doing. I'll just share a link. So that's not technically Hackalong category, but Armando's been doing a bunch of reputation modeling that's shared. Like some of the simplistic use cases are shared in the document that I just shared. But when you do have bridging of reputation across DNAs, it opens up some very cool possibilities that we call mimetic bridging. So basically building, like, you can do things like broaden the number of members in your collective without diluting culture. You can fork cultures really well and reward people even though they're contributing across DNAs, which is really cool because I think we've never really had forking that has been non-exclusionary. So I think rewarding with reputation currencies is super fun. Armando's also done some modeling around constructing complex cultures. So basically using like a bunch of reputation scores to build like one reputation metric, like, what kind of couchsurfing host you might be, for example, based on like reputation scores across multiple DNAs. So that document I just shared has a bunch of like simplistic use cases that are articulated. And we can share some of the more complex ones as time progresses.
Yeah. Can I have 2 secs?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to show you something and then ask, can I have the screen as well?
Oh, sorry, yeah. Yeah, we're looking to kill time before Kamal shows up. But Feli, maybe if he's not joining in a couple minutes, you can just get going.
Sounds good. Okay, I'm going to just watch this animation, which I've modified again. Okay, so the idea of that is that each of those points on those circles is a node. And so all those different shapes, I'm part of all those different DHTs, right? Different numbers of people. And if you think about the size of those, like they're big, small sides. So if you looked at those on the side, they'd be lines, right? So short line, long line, like that, right? And then if you look at something like,
Really, Philip, you use Facebook?
Sorry?
You use Facebook?
Yeah. Not by choice. Right. And then if you look at music waveform, right, it's a bunch of lines, short lines and long lines. And that gives you a really good feeling of what the song's like, you know, like high bits, low bits, all that kind of thing. And if you do it with something like Tractor, where you get color, man, how annoying is this video bar all the time? So if you just look at a track, right, see how it's different colors and all that kind of stuff. So with this information, you can tell a lot about the track. Like it's you know, lots of bass here, hi-hats, not very loud, loud, etc. Right? So what occurred to me was that if you think about each of the networks that you're in, right? So this is one view of it, but on the other view, it's like all these lines, right? And if you put those into like a waveform, that would be all of my holochain existence, right? So essentially my holochain consciousness. And if you had a way of measuring something in each of those networks, like reputation, right? So let's say that if you've got a really good reputation, it's green, and if you've got a shit reputation, it's red. So then you go back to something like this, you could look at yours or someone else's existence across all of their networks, right? And then you could form these things where you could say associate all of your green ones together and all of your red ones together, right? So that you can work out, right, where is my life good, where is it struggling, and it doesn't have to be reputation. You could be measuring anything. Maybe you're measuring stressful words in messages, or you're measuring something like that. I think that people still don't get, right, that this information is on my device.
Yeah.
So I can ask it whatever questions I like, and it can be as personal, it can be disgustingly personal, right? Because it's own information for me. So this idea of reputation, I would like to see it as an analysis tool as well, where I can run all these different types of algorithms. So so like a stressful words algorithm, right? I could run that against all of my DHTs with all the different measurements, and then make these like, you know, waveforms of whatever it is we're measuring.
Yeah.
Because my wife's a psychotherapist, art psychotherapist, and they do this thing that's called eco maps, where you map out influences on your life. So I have a family eco map where the interactions between me and my personal family. Then there's like extended family, and then there's friends, then music people, then there's all these different like groups of people, and there's the idea of systems where 1 + 1 isn't necessarily 2. So let's say that today I'm really sad and depressed. That may be because I'm hungry, or it may be because I've had a disagreement with my family, or it may be because I haven't been allowed to DJ since March. So which one of those things or how do all of those fit together? And it just occurred to me that like this idea of like these DHTs turned on the side were lines, and then you could so that way you could get a really good it's kind of like a heat map of your life, really. And if you could then have, say you had one of these life waves, there you go, coined that. And that was analyzing stressful words. And then I had another one that was analyzing money-related things, or another one that was, I don't know, scores in games or something like that. Because you can have loads of these.
Yeah, I think the only way this conversation doesn't become dystopian is in an agent-centric environment, right? Because imagine all of this sitting in a centralized ledger somewhere, like analyzing people, and especially with regards to reputation, because it lets everything get so much more contextual. Like there is no, then you're not talking about an absolute good reputation or bad reputation, but it's just, how relevant is a person for me? And so that's like something we've been thinking about for the reputation vault. Like eventually when you're navigating through the distributed economy, you will need a dashboard, and the reputation vault will serve as that dashboard. So yeah, if you come across
you know what, so just looking at Tractor again, right? This is this one on the left here is like a normal track of AIFF file, single file. This one on the right is what they call a stems file. So this has 4 tracks in it, individual tracks. So drums, bass, and box, and you can play them all individually when you're DJing. So you can just play the drums or just play the vocals or whatever. So if you look at this idea of what I was just talking about, breaking down your life and saying, right, so this is here's my overall waveform, right? And then you can break it down and say, and you can do stuff like turn down the volume, right? So how does turning down the volume on something affect your overall waveform? So you can do stuff like, okay, if I stop talking to Sid, look how happy I get. Right?
Or like in a reputation context, right? Like I know Sid across like 7 different contexts, and this is my composite view of him. And that's like super, like he might be a good person to give, he might be a good person to business with, but he's definitely not a good person to host as a couch surfing host or whatever.
Something like that. And you can, like, each one of those lines could be the algorithm that you've chosen to run.
I think that's,
I'm going to play with that.
I'm going to think about it in forms of music, because this is also like coming up in some of our conversations around composing complex reputation, because you want to like create one waveform that's actually like 7 or 8 different composite, like individual waveforms. And what's a good way to do it, right? Like you can't just smash them all together.
We could take that 2D waveform, because that's what those are in Tractor, right? And you could 3D them easily, because you've got, and then you could do things like you could rotate the waveform to see different aspects of things. And if you're ever planning to do any of this kind of stuff, there's a JavaScript library called P5, and it is phenomenal. It does like Fourier transforms in microseconds.
Yeah, that is helpful, because that's where we're at, really. P5, you said.
P5.js, It does all sorts of like that hardcore mathematical calculating of stuff. People are doing fractals.
That sounds cool. Cool. Let's get back to Feli. Feli, what do you think?
Yeah, this is an interesting conversation. I went ahead and shared this link that Lynn has shared with us. In
are you sharing the screen?
Kind of chat. Can you see it?
The taxonomy one? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I think it's a way to what you all are talking about. I think could have application to see like the health of the infrastructure of a community in terms of the needs and resources. This is a chart for creating a common resource identification code for different types of needs you might consider a part of the commons, branching out into different categories, starting with basically everything to things such as needs, skills, interests, knowledge. And then, for instance, from knowledge, you can go towards more specialized areas. And it would be very complicated to measure all this in one visualization of like a track, to use a musical kind of analogy. But if you maybe specialize in a certain area, for instance, a lot of us in the space we've been talking about are working with food. So I guess it must be under eat and drink, and then you can sort of specify a little better.
Yeah, Feli, can you share the link to this?
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, it's very fun to play with. It's an interesting project. Let's see, where is the chat?
Awesome. Yeah, that's helpful. So for those who joined in late, Michael, we've been killing time because Kamal hasn't showed up yet. But Ferry, what do you think? Do you want to just proceed and you and Lynn can chat a bit? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Why don't we start? Why don't you share a little bit of context to today's conversation, though? Like what you guys went through last week and what you've been able to do the last few days.
Sure. So last week, the big takeaway for me was seeing the details and how easy it is really to connect the Hollow REA API into a front end, into a user interface. And through the work that Basyn's been doing to make it pretty easy through Apollo client to hook up, for our instance, was a React, let me go ahead and share again, the React front end. And what Kamal's been doing the past few days, but I get to take the glory because he's not here, is so we were thinking, so we have our Basyn app, which is for a biofertilizer. Should I expand that? Is it?
I think it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. I'll put it
better.
Oh, better? All right. Let me just reshare it then. Yeah, so our Basyn app is for operations and managing and accounting a biofertilizer, which takes inputs of food waste from farmers and from food processors and produces biofertilizer and biogas, which can be used for powering a grid or a truck for distribution. And so the idea is, how can we track all these flows and link them up into a circular regenerative ecosystem? So as much nutrients as possible are being restored to the fields of farmers, and it becomes a sort of a contributory sort of supply chain that has a closed loop that's regenerating the wealth and the ecology of the players. And so the Basyn app is focusing on that biofertilizer loop. And this is just, for instance, an invoice of somebody who's paying for fertilizer. It's very likely someone who also provided food waste to the to the biodigester. And so there's some sort of mutual credit agreement or some sort of cooperative agreement, but we have not worked out the details of that yet. But what we were thinking about last week is, so there's a lot of other people in the space who want to use the Hollow REA and the value flows language and apply it to their specific area in the infrastructure, in particular food infrastructure. So we've been talking with Victor, who's working with a project called Shiro for food buyer clubs, to make agreements with farmers to make agreements at the beginning of the growing season to say, we expect that there's going to be this much demand for food, and can we expect that local farmers to fill that demand, and create the buying agreements that allow that to happen. And for our loop with the food waste to fertilizer, to really make it a circular economy, it becomes our concern about how the farmers are being coordinated with the local food supply, so to sort of make this a full circular loop. And so we were thinking, what does it look like if our app is interoperable. So a farmer, Carol, could also go over and work with Shiro and switch over to the Shiro side of the application, bridging the relevant data and benefiting from that ecosystem with enough overlap for it to share from common functionality, but ultimately doing different parts of the economy. So that's where we're at. I'm sure Kamal could say more about the thought behind the design, but it's sort of like you go through the profile page, you're able to switch through. You switch through to the different apps while the other one is running in the background. And yeah, this is just one piece of the larger flow. I showed a graphic last week. It might be worth showing again. But let's see on the GitHub. This is the Basyn flow. And right now we're really just focusing on the connection between the bio.
Yeah, can you zoom into that?
Sure thing. Oh, got all chopped up. Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so the user app right now is from the perspective of Carol, and receiving an invoice for Bob. But oh, there's another graph that's worth mentioning. I think it would be in. This is a chart from Lynn as well.
So are you actually using REA to do that stuff?
Yes, last week we connected to the API, and we're still working on the details. But right now, this is just a demonstration app. It's not running, but our last iteration is currently hooked up.
Cool. Well, if you're not too far down the road of using React, I would strongly suggest Vue.js with
with what?
With a framework called Vuetify, which gives you material design, but it doesn't look like Google.
Okay,
I've done bucket loads of React, and I've done heaps of Vue now, and I'm firmly in the Vue camp. It just seems to be much more modular, and it's just faster to work with.
Yeah, React seems to be pretty bloated, I would say, in terms of what it requires. And my understanding is Vue is a little bit more similar to like the web tech kind of.
Yeah, Vue is much closer
traditionally
to the web components approach than React.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's good advice. And I take it that would be interoperable more with the Chimera project. Yeah.
Because what I'm looking for to do is to actually help projects like you guys, but I want to start building the REA components with CRISPR, so that we can start building up this library of parts in Chimera. And then this morning it occurred to me how I can aggregate parts into whole applications and stuff. So
yeah, that would be a big breakthrough in being able to design these, because in some way that's essentially what we're doing, but the ecosystem's still pretty young, so it'd be nice to contribute to that.
So what I'd like to do is like this kind of graph is that would be your application designer. And so where it says processed food, like you put on the processed food part into the application, and that's the UI and all the DNA stuff that works with it. And then figure out some way of doing it with like a workflow.
It's a good point. Let's see. Yeah, just to be clear, so Basyn would be the food waste side of the situation, and Shiro would be the buying club side. And there's other actors involved, other group agents, you might say, such as seed share for the farmer inputs, besides just the fertilizer, but like the seeds, and creating a circular loop there. There's also Jules, although we haven't really been in conversation with them yet. They're with the food drying and creating a seconds economy.
That tastes awesome.
Yeah. So,
tried it? Have you tried the food crystals?
No, I don't think any of us.
Yeah, we had some when we were in in Germany. Yeah, just mix it with like raw yogurt, and yeah, it was amazing.
They basically just dry food, right? Like no.
It's a gentle dehydration process, so it doesn't get warm. Yeah, and it comes out with these amazing little flakes, like all the different fruits and stuff will come out like pop rocks, really.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's a great way of dealing with food that may not be produce shelf quality, but still completely edible, good to eat. So a large advantage that thinking about food waste or food seconds is right now not a lot of people see the value that they have, and so we'd be sort of drawing the lines for people and creating a way to participate in that value flow. And we're talking about different sort of economic agreements and coordination and governance models, and that's might be a conversation for a different time, but I just want to throw it out there. The thinking about having each be a self-organized entity that has common functionality in its governance that are being performed together, but they're ultimately being directed in the specific areas that they're going. And there's Kamal. I just shared your code, Kamal.
Hey, Philly,
So
with
sorry.
with the way that you're drawing your process diagrams there, and your business modeling process, have you seen VPN?
VPN?
Yeah, hang on, I'll get you a link.
But yeah, come on, welcome.
Hey, thank you. So sorry.
Feli took us through a bit of what you guys have been up to. And maybe you can just add a little more context, but Philip was just sharing a link. Sorry,
Okay.
Philip, go ahead.
Just for doing process modeling and business processes and stuff. This BPMN modeler, it's called. So BPMN is like a standard way of talking about processes. And then they got this cool little designer where you can design your processes, and then it gives you a common format for the actual business process itself as a JavaScript file, and then that can be consumed by a whole bunch of different clients and stuff. So
that's kind of cool.
It's super cool. This is what have you run into? Who was the construction mob? I remember. Anyway, they were using it.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, this is cool.
That's really cool. And what we're noticing is, and just from talking to different people, is this approach we're taking could probably be applied in different industries. I was talking to someone who works in timber, processing trees for construction and so on. And now they're trying to create a sort of coordination in between, because a lot of the people involved in that currently just use Excel and phone calls. And so creating something that's a little bit more technical. There's definitely a space for even very traditional industries to be transformed by a technology like Holochain and REA, Holo REA. And if we're able to distill the abstract patterns in one context, the idea is to be able to go to different industries and contexts and sort of be closing the loop and sort of say, are timber people talking to the farm or the agroforestry manager? Are they talking together? Is there like a 20-year vision? Is there a 100-year vision that's regenerative? And working towards using the patterns we're discovering in one space and applying in one space and taking the lessons to other contexts and other people and other networks. And I think that's because our concern, our motivation really comes from wanting solutions that can be implemented as quick as possible, that create the most benefit as possible, the most healthiest, wealthiest networks of regenerative economics as possible. And we need it as soon as possible, but we also don't want to compromise. We're looking at this sort of interesting balance between, you can have scale, you can have strategy, and you can have ethics, but very rarely do you get all three. so we're trying to have a fine balance between the three, and it's not easy. So love the open to the hard conversations. So yeah.
Lynn, do you want to add, or Kamal, do you want to add something from your perspective? Maybe Lynn, you should go.
I haven't done any work on this since the last gathering, so I don't know that I have too much to say. Kamal?
I'm sorry I wasn't here, so I don't know. Was there something specific you guys wanted me to touch on, or?
Can I ask a question before we get into the rest of it? So
yeah, and maybe after Sam, like we could also get into, like, as an entrepreneur, like what are the benefits of thinking about integrating with HoloREA, and like why someone should go down this path. Like I think those watching the video will really benefit from it. But yeah, let's go with Sam's question first.
So I'm currently on a course for platform co-ops, and one of the members of that course is a cooperative in Tasmania that recycles stuff. So they take input and they recycle it into art or whatever. So I see what you're doing here is very analogous, and what you're talking about is like creating the tools that allow you someone to build that. And obviously from their point of view, one of the barriers is having someone that can build the technology. You know, I doubt if they know people that know React, and I doubt if they've got the money to pay someone to build something in React for them that does what we're talking about. So if they were interested, what would be the starting point for them to find out more about what you guys are doing, or how they could follow along, or maybe do the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things we're doing are pretty open source. You know, we're just putting stuff out there and learning by doing. And, you know, I think our vision and our goal is to be a global movement. It can't just be located in Seattle. Like we need to transition to a circular economy globally relatively quickly. So that's why we're kind of doing things in an open way and trying to, you know, all our maps are in Kumu. So it's just all open right now. So if they want to watch the videos, they can do that. If they want to come to a call, they can do that. You know, and I think we have a friend on that platform co-op class, Christoph. He's from Seattle area and interested and connected to our community. So however you guys want to join, we share language, you know.
All right, I think there's a global meeting on Saturday, because we've now split into individual groups in Australia and I guess all over the world. But there's a global meeting on Saturday that would be a good time for Christos and this other Tasmanian team to maybe hook up.
Yeah, that sounds great. So what I was hoping to do today is just kind of give a general overview of like what's our vision in some ways, and then also dive a little deeper. So kind of zoom out a system and then dive a little deeper into the architecture and some of our questions. And then that'll involve HoloREA and kind of why we want to use HoloREA and what's been really interesting about exploring it. And then show the updated prototype that we were building on last week. Last week, Hospi was able to like actually build something and connect it to Holochain, so that was nice. So now we want to get it to the next phase.
Yeah, just so you know, Kamal, I shared it a little bit, but feel free to go into more detail.
Yeah, I think the flow that you just articulated is great. Let's go with that.
Okay. Great. And Feli, did you show anything? Did you show any like prototypes or anything?
Yeah, it was really quick. Just sort of talking from Carol's perspective, switching from Basyn to Shiro.
Okay, got it. see if I can share here. I'm actually going to give a really quick overview of sort of, because one of the questions was like, what's our vision for why are we using Holo REA? I think a big thing we're trying to do is move from a linear economy to a circular economy. And so this is a double loop model from Berkana. And a lot of the things that has been driving me as a designer, I call myself a transition designer, and is really systems-based thinking. And when I found Holochain, I was like, wow, there's a bunch of systems thinkers actually building stuff. That's really great. But the basic idea is to like connect pioneers of an emergent system and create communities of practice. And so this to us is a circular economy, but we also add in the idea of just transition because we need to make sure that more and more people can benefit from that economy, not just a few corporate players, you know? And then the last thing is that just some grounding, like we're using this framework called circular economy, and this is out of Europe. You know, this is called the butterfly diagram, and it's just a framework with common language. That I think if there's anything of reason why we want to use Holo REA and REA is because its goal is to be a common language. I think what we tend to do is split ourselves into our own little communities, and then we'll take something and make it our own, and then we have to learn a whole new language. And so I think a lot of what we're trying to do is just find languages that work globally. So that's the general overview. I just wanted to show that our vision is transitioning towards the circular economy. Oh, actually, I should add that where we're specifically focusing on is biogas, anaerobic digestion, and soil restoration. I think a lot of these loops here are really connected to what we're working on. Did you go into any of this, Feli? Any of the?
I shared that one overview, but we haven't looked at this one yet.
Okay, so like Philly said, we're going to focus on Carol. Carol has a farm. This is a real person in Basyn Island, in the Seattle area. She's got a 5,000 gallon tank that she's using to water her farm. Carol's not a real name, but they're watering their farm with this digestate or liquid biofertilizer. It's super high in nitrogen, and this is delivered on a truck. This truck. Which is powered by food waste. So it's just a converted biogas truck, which gets digested, and this digester is what actually makes it happen. The digester works like a cow's stomach. You feed it, it makes pee and poop, in essence, and gas, and that gas is used to power things. The pee is the liquid fertilizer. And then the actual like feedstock, in this case on Basyn Island, it's a tofu factory, but you'll see that changes. And then we do not work on the firsts or seconds. We don't work on fresh food. That's not what Basyn does. Basyn's mission is to focus on the flows of waste. So that's important to mention. You'll also see actually Shiro here. So the model expands quite large, but Shiro, their basic model is buying clubs. And so from Carol, they'd be buying like vegetables with a group of people, and that group could get discounts by buying collectively and help with distribution problems that a farmer might face with selling to consumers. So other than that, I'm not going to get into too much other stuff. I'm going to stick to something pretty simple stuff. I think that's all I wanted to show for that. I did want to kind of just show the architecture piece of this. Last week we focused on Hackathon 1, which was July 1st. Our main mission was to have a basic understanding of architecture of what Basyn looked like. We gave possibly a invoice UI, very simple, and it had some kind of Holo REA layers. still a question of like, how does this work? So hopefully through these conversations, you get clear. I've updated the UI on this, so that's what you'll see today. There is an interest to connect Stripe into this next phase, so we'll see how that works. This Basyn Dominion specific zones. So this is kind of biofertilizer and food last. That's our language that we're trying to bring to the REA world, or the conversation. So that's what we think we're bringing to this, is more of a domain specific language. But this shared marketplace, which we're still trying to figure out where it belongs, I think that's what I worked on. I think this is the thing. I didn't know what it was, and I think once I started building, I was like, I think that's what I'm building, is this shared marketplace. And I'll show what that is in a second, but that I think would fit in somewhere in the stack. And that would also work with Holo REA. We're specifically using the observation layer right now, and Lynn would kind of correct us on anything we're gonna be wrong on. So some of those ideas are like economic events and economic resources. So when POSPI did the prototype, they said economic event is trading, it's moving the biofertilizer from Bob to Carol, right? Bob had biofertilizer. So I just want to explain the observation layer. It took me a long time to figure this out. I mean, I know I watched the story of Pi and all these things that Lynn and Bob had been putting out, and I realized I basically had to draw it myself to understand it. And so I think I'm starting to understand it. It's taken quite a bit, and I figured I just share the drawings, make sure I'm saying this right, and share it with people so they understand it. But in essence, it's definitely not Sketch. There's a knowledge layer, a planning layer, and an observation layer. And those are all different zones that POSPI built. I think there's another one too, I'm not sure. But we're mostly right now focusing on the observation layer. Say again?
Specification is probably what you mean.
Okay, specification. Yeah. Okay, cool. And so the observation layer is a record of processes that have already happened. So it's basically a supply chain tracking system. So you'll see that in the prototype. I built that in, and you'll see it. And then I haven't gotten much into these other layers, but just so you know, the planning layer describes what's intended to happen. So like offers, requests, schedules, pre-sale. I think we're starting to touch into that with the new prototype and the shared marketplace. And again, we're still getting clear on what the shared marketplace is. And then this knowledge layer is what describes how processes work. So classifications and policies, procedures, things like that. And then just to zoom in, like what it looks like, from a code level, like, these are some ways I've seen POSPI and folks, kind of code this stuff out. There's lot numbers and tracking identifiers. And so these are things that we imagine will come up in the code, but maybe not needed for this conversation. So that's basically it. I honestly don't understand the conductor. I don't know what it does. And I don't really understand the node very well, to the point of how is it different than Bob's. So right now we're considering Bob's node a black box. And that's all to be discussed and understood. Last pieces here is, I think you might have seen that we're focusing on this part of the diagram. So very much the agreements between Bob and Carol, and some batches of fertilizer, some transferring events that are happening. And then we'll dive a little bit into how Shiro and Basyn overlap. And so for the last presentation, we focused on this, and we built this on Holochain. So this interaction happened where the digester sent biofertilizer to grow to the farmer, Carol. And then in this concept, I think what we have is Carol, well, I just started the Shiro thing. I didn't actually get into it much. So let me just jump into that. Any questions before I move on?
I can clarify a couple things where you had questions along the way, Kamal, if that's of interest.
Yeah, please do.
So I don't know beans about the conductor either, but I can talk to you a little bit about the observation layer and the planning layer, and also the knowledge layer, which, yeah, POSPI has divided into more zones than that. But the planning layer you definitely are working with, because making an order is part of the planning layer. So it's not just the marketplace. It's like, yeah, I see you have biofertilizer and I want 1,000 gallons, next week. Can you deliver it? So that's part of the planning layer. When it gets delivered, that's part of the observation layer. And those are connected. So economic events will fulfill commitments, which is part of your planning layer. In this case, it's orders and things that are around exchange. But as we move kind of backwards into the biodigester processes, then you're into kind of production things. So you can also plan your production also, and then execute it on the observation layer. The knowledge layer has a bunch of stuff that probably we're not using at the moment, but it does have this resource specification and then various classifications. Felly showed this example taxonomy. Some of that stuff, the taxonomy goes there. And there's a bunch of technical questions around that actually there was a discussion with Kiki. He's doing that seed share application. And there's a bunch of technical questions that I have and that she has around what do we do with existing classification schemes, like there are existing things out there on the web for food, for example. So for like plant types, which was her concern, that are pretty standard. So what do we do with that? Do we access it, from the semantic web? Do we load that stuff all into its own DNA and access it through holochain? So there's some open questions there. And let's see, what else did I catch on the way by?
I just wanted to add to that. There's this idea of domain. What REA helps do is domain-driven design. So this idea of this taxonomy of these other words that are out there around food, that other food apps on holochain or other food apps can have the same shared language, so they know these are seeds and this is biofertilizer, and etc.
That reminds me. Good, triggered one other thing I saw when you were talking about like a domain-specific zone. I think some people will need that, but I haven't seen any place yet that you need it. Like the kind of things you are talking about can all be configured on the knowledge layer. Those are like resource specifications. So I don't know if you need to write your own zone. Haven't seen it yet.
Something that comes to mind would be there's a certain complexity that happens for the digester operator when they're taking in different types of food waste or different types of organic matter, and it creates different recipes for the fertilizer or the gas based on the chemical components. And that's something that we haven't touched on much, but I'm guessing that's the knowledge layer.
That's hopefully we can handle that with recipes on the knowledge layer, and then you should be able to generate your plan from a recipe, and it's there. But you don't have to. You can like type it in too, right? But yeah, that should be all configurable on the knowledge layer.
I could see it becoming a point where to fulfill certain types of orders, the operator looks for different types of inputs and hopes to make agreements on the food waste input side with certain people.
Yeah, Kamal has a little bit of a prototype of this, but it doesn't go all the way back into the digestion process, but it could. You should be able to say, yeah, I want to order some biofertilizer, and here's what I care about here's what I care about in the inputs. Here's the batches that are available right now, for example. Here's what went into this one. Here's what went into that one. So you can trace backwards and see all the inputs through, for as long as anybody has been willing to enter the data for it, right?
And what's
now
really great
that,
about
go ahead.
Soil science is that one, farmers really give a crap about what's in the soil, what's in the fertilizer, and especially for organics and things like regenerative agriculture. And two, the biodigestion process really has this beautiful spectrography that shows all the different chemicals, and so that stuff exists, which is helpful.
That's actually a really good example where probably REA doesn't have enough for you. Like if you want to record, I just, sampled this batch and here's all of its characteristics and how much, whatever you just said, right? We could, and POSPI has run into this before for another application where we needed some kind of a measurement model. And he found one that might be useful. But anyway, that is not currently part of HoloREA. It would be a really nice add-on thing that probably a lot of people would use.
I was going to just kind of zoom out for a second and just kind of show the prototype, but I just wanted to show like what we're showing in the prototype.
Yeah, just also at this point, just keeping an eye on time. Maybe we take another 7 to 10 minutes to wrap up. Okay. And if someone needs to hop off, like just feel free to hop off. No worries. Thanks.
So again, we're focusing on Carol, and we're very much focused on the flow from the digester to Carol. So this is the flow of the biofertilizer, but we're going to get into this. The other thing I wanted to share about HoloREA is, when we start expanding and we look at, where do food banks come in? Where does a company like Jules come in? Like, what about feeding animals? Like, all of these systems could work together in a circular way if we design it that way. And I think HoloREA gives us that opportunity. But right now, let's just focus on one loop and figure out if we can actually close a loop together. So that's the kind of general idea. So there's Carol, she's a farmer. I'm logged in as in Basyn. I could potentially log in to Shiro. This is just my stab at interoperability for Carol. I don't know if it's right or not, but I started it. So in Basyn, this is straight up just an invoicing system. So she's not asking for biofertilizer. It could be a phone call. They could visit each other on a farm, whatever. It's just a way to pay for it. But she has a general idea of what she's getting, what she got. In this case, it's been delivered. So there is, this is the HoloREA layer, the observation layer, and these are wrong. These are just for prototype. But the idea is that that you can see where the product has come from, and potentially where it's going. I can click on it maybe, and maybe there's a map. So that was kind of one potential idea. So I can pay a bill, I can enter a number, and this is for POSPI to be able to plug in data. We do have the idea of paying with Stripe. That started maybe mutual credit, who knows? I don't know. Just put it on here just to have the discussion. But this is what we're going to try to do, I believe. So you can confirm the amount, and then you can see it went from delivered to Carol paid, and then this would be some kind of thank you and some kind of confirmation. But the provenance, which is the knowledge, the observation layer in HoloREA, is just what's the theory, what's the series of events. And so that's in essence the very simple flow. What I realized about this whole thing was Shiro, who has, buying clubs, would want a very similar thing. They had asked, well, can I see my product delivered? And I was like, well, actually, it's the same idea. It's just the observation layer in Holo REA, right? So why build it twice? We should be building this together. And that was where I kind of got the idea of a shared marketplace. So then that's why I pretty much started with the interoperability. So I click on Shiro, and then this is the beginnings of Shiro. Same kind of, it's all responsive, which is nice. So yeah, so let's say Carol wants to sell her onions. She can sell her onions on Shiro and then do all her stuff there. And then let's say a month passes and she wants to, sell her food waste back to the digester or send it because she's actually paying. She can actually launch Basyn again and, pay for her pickup for her food blasts. So in this case, I did build that out. So this is a full circle, all in one app. So yeah, I'll end it there.
Yeah, and I think as an entrepreneur, sorry, go ahead.
Someone asked, what is food last? Food last is food waste. Actually, I'll just show it to you. First is fresh food. Seconds is food that might be a little bit, like maybe it would not be as perfect or something, it's not as pretty or something. And then there's thirds. Thirds is like for animals. And then last is like for commercial reasons, like compost or digesters.
I was just saying, from an entrepreneur's perspective, you're always questioning why go down a particular design methodology. And I think what you showcased here, the interoperability, is, I think, the strongest argument for going down the REA path, right? And I think in that sense, also the strongest argument for going down the distributed path, because I think we all tend to buy into these models more from an intellectual perspective. So it's great to just see it, and to see the tangible benefits of it on the ground. Like, why should anyone do this? And so when I think about it, I'm thinking, everything starts getting so streamlined, like, Carol's accounts and receipts, for example. Her accounting software is just like, it's right there. Like, she doesn't need to make more entries.
Right.
Anyone else who wants to plug into the system, can also check inventory levels across the supply chain at any point of time. And so it's just, when you have agent-centric accounting, like, that's the benefit, for you to be able to see snapshots without those data silos. I think that's what is really powerful to me.
I sort of wonder, and don't know the answer, if it could even go a step farther than this, and you wouldn't have to log into Basyn and log into Shiro. That information would just all be part of your, your user experience and your dashboard or whatever it would be,
Yeah, I think this was my beginnings of a dashboard. I realized in the end, I just added logged in just because I didn't know how it worked, but
I don't know either, Kamal. I'm totally blue skying here. I see Philip is gone.
This would actually be your homepage, and I think this is what Philip Beadle's been doing. Is it's a bit of a dashboard that launches multiple apps, right? So I literally stole this from Philip.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, he didn't say logged in. I did that, but.
So a couple of questions, Kamal, real quick. One, like, how are you thinking about Basyn? Like, would this, can people actually fork what you guys are creating for their own context? Is that how you're thinking about Basyn? And two, real quick, I will also say, like, I think now, if we're moving to agent-centric accounting, it also means the role of the organization isn't to establish trust. Like that trust can be established in a peer-to-peer way through reputation systems, and that's what excites me. Like it unbundles the role of, like in the past you had companies that serve that role, right? But now that we can actually start trusting each other or have context into, like Carol might now have context into Victor rather than Shiro. And so we can start going into those genuinely peer-to-peer interactions, which is why I think reputation will play a role there. So yeah, these two questions.
Yeah, I think we were talking to Lynn and Bob, you know, and I think what we were trying to figure out is how do you become a sustainable business on Holochain from an entrepreneur's perspective, you know, and we can't have everything just be open and free. It's like we need to make a living.
Yeah.
So how does that work when you have unenclosable networks and all these things, right? So what we were trying to figure out was maybe we have a pro version of Basyn and then an open version, but we realized it actually creates silos. And when we were building the prototype, we realized that this shared marketplace is more and more the need than we imagined. And so we just, you know, so to answer your question of, you know, can people fork the code, is like, yeah, we plan on that. And a lot of what we're doing right now is just prototype code, so it's pretty quick stuff. And so we're happy to collaborate with people and just try to build stuff. Because in the end, we need to make sure this works. You know?
And I think there are some interesting conversations there that we've also been having at Sacred Capital. Thinking about organizing things more as neighborhoods rather than apps, and so maybe Basyn starts thinking in that direction. So your role actually becomes like facilitating biodigester neighborhoods or whatever that means. Like it's a slightly different way, and that's how you think about sustainability. Yeah, I'd love to have a chat at some point, like some of these questions that we're running through as well.
I hope the business couldn't maybe go into that. Who knows? We're hoping to have some deeper questions, you know, or deeper conversations.
Yeah, that's been my hope too. Let's see.
I'm sure Feli has a thought on this as well. I just want to make sure there's space.
Yeah, it's a difficult conversation. I believe that either way we'll have to be strategic, and either way we're committed to giving. You know, we're giving forward our knowledge and contributing to the open source ecosystem. So these components can help build up circular economies all over the world. And even if we had the most corporate ownership private model, we wouldn't even be able to scale to that level to implement all the circular economies that we wanted. So just from our strategic value commitment, it doesn't make sense to do things in a completely closed way. There's going to be people who have solutions and specific ways of setting up the code in their context. And I think we understand our role as facilitating that rather than trying to own it. But it's sort of
Well, I just want to add that when we spoke to Bob and Lynn the other day, they mentioned this model. It's like a cooperative code option where you can pay into the co-op to get access to the code. You know, and so it's that type of business model. But yeah, I'm guessing we need to rethink business models in some ways too. So, you know,
there's an interesting conversation we're having with Impact Bioenergy, the people who make the digester itself, and they're looking at a more cooperative ownership of the digester itself. And so my intuition is we're going to be providing a service through software that the people in that network who might choose to be cooperatively owning of the infrastructure, we would be facilitating their operations. And our business model lies in providing a service to them. And it's kind of ironic, but there are precedents for this cooperative ownership in things such as the oil pipeline infrastructure, where it's such an expensive endeavor. So people contribute money and they have a direct ownership over it, and they get direct return on capital that's technically not taxed in the US.
Really? So those are cooperative run, like oil infrastructure?
It's probably a joint venture or something.
Yeah, that's what I think it's what's called a joint venture.
Yeah, I think specifically it's called a master limited partnership, and they're looking into that. Yeah, so there's a lot. It's really fascinating. Like Amazon, for instance, is a network, a tightly wound network of cooperative actors, but it's just the corporate model is designed to benefit the shareholders more than the communities that they interact with. But they are an infrastructure company, really being driven by cooperative strategies. It's just the ownership at the end of the day pays a certain shareholder.
Yeah.
Same with oil pipelines. And it just gives it a whole nother layer. Just for instance, I was thinking what that means, like given Standing Rock, where you have oil pipelines versus the indigenous sovereign lands. It really became down to a set of shareholders who had a stake in this establishment versus luckily more people turned out that show that we are also shareholders in the earth, and indigenous people are shareholders in their, their sovereignty of their land. And there's just inherent, inherent link to this. It's not economically codified in our day and age, but what if it was, what if it could be if not economically, but mathematically codified, because we give so much weight to quantification. And so I see what we're doing is sort of setting the path toward language that at least can quantify, and sounds similar to the Reputation Project, at least quantify things that are seem considered ethereal, but in the grand scheme of things have more weight and more gravity than they're currently given, if that makes sense. So there might be some sort of way to go about this cooperatively from a development standpoint too, and bring publicity to what we're doing and provide and sort of get crowdfunding for what we're doing and fund operations through like Co-Makery or something. And we're able to go on a goodwill, like value-based income. And that might solve some problems, but it might not get us all the way. So yeah, these are difficult conversations, but to me, it's like being able to balance viability, scalability, and ethics, and not really having to sacrifice. So can we get a win-win-win? So
on the holochain.
Possibly Noah from Co-Makery and I were just chatting before this, and some of these topics have been coming up, and some of these designs, like I think, get solved when you might create that master code base, and which can be forked into different contexts, but you create a stream of rewards that flow back to you as the originator of sorts. And that doesn't mean like an Amazon-like model where you continue to control and like dominate in terms of cash flows. Like it could be a trickle up as opposed to trickle down. But in that sense, it creates this culture of rewarding people for ideating, and also, at some level also encourages people to fork while giving credit, because, I think unless we create those feedback loops, you'll just see forking without giving credit, and that's probably worse. So to create some kind of shared infrastructure and feedback loops, which allow people to build a small piece of the puzzle and still be held by the community and rewarded by the community for doing it.
That certainly makes sense to spread that over a lot of user groups, that actually gives you a prayer of being able to support infrastructure like this.
So I feel like that's one of my pet things. Like I would love to action some of that, and which is why I think the neighborhoods conversation is like that's how I think about neighborhoods as compared to apps. Like you're building as, a piece of the puzzle, not like in isolation. And I think that's important that we start doing it. And in the long term, I mean, ultimately, what are we really doing? We're just like building one widget in this larger thing. And so I think because we haven't built these loops over the last 2 decades, we've seen tech empires because every little widget creator has just sold out to the larger empire, right? And I think that's the problem we need to solve, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's worth just mentioning the typical startup model is to be acquired.
Yeah.
Create the thing and be acquired as 7 years or sooner.
Which is kind of like a land grab of sorts, right? Like they just go like grab as much of a piece of land as we can and then sell it to the empire. Like that's basically let's
It's
squander
extractive economics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
and I'm currently in this place where I don't want to go through that same loop again. Like we've seen those same loops over
Mhm.
decades, and I'm just like, let's just sit down and solve this. Like, what's the point of like 5 years from now being resentful about how naive we were? Like, what's the point?
Well, just to offer, the one thing that Basyn's trying to do is start really small. So
Mm,
having these small loops and really understanding all of it, ethics, scalability, etc.
mm,
Reputation, the
mm,
code,
mm,
usability.
mm.
Start
Yeah,
small and see if we can get it to work there.
yeah. Yeah, I'll loop you guys into some of this. Michael has a quick question. Any thoughts on a value equation approach where software contribution gets factored into the value equation, then the compensation from whatever income the corporate venture earns through market interaction? Yep, that is basically what we've thought about for neighborhoods. Like it's on the basis of how often someone's microservice or library gets called, like the reward flows back up through whoever's forked the code and generated, and the rewards are both like reputational and monetary. And I think the higher up you go in the pyramid or back in the forking chain, like the more it becomes reputational and less monetary. Does that make sense? Like, so for example, if your code is forked once, you probably get like an equal reputational and monetary reward. If it's forked 5 times, you get more of a reputational and less of a monetary, like, in that sense. Like, I think that's like a good example of trickle up economics. So in the longer run, like if your code is used like a lot of times or has been forked quite a lot, you're not the Jeff Bezos of the world, but in fact you're highly regarded, and you still get some amount of monetary reward, but it's not like you are the monetary king of all of this.
Yeah, nice thing would be is if people can kind of figure that out, kind of
Yeah,
collectively a little bit, and
yeah.
democratically, and what's really fair,
Yeah, so I've actually
That
been
would be
thinking,
that would be
yeah,
great.
I'd agree. Like, I think some of this has to be kind of democratic or at least like has to have that kind of vision for it to be truly adopted. I'll share some of these ramblings with you guys and see, how we can build this out. But I think honestly, Kamal, like this is the holochain problem, right? Like if we want to go agent centric, or like if we want to build unenclosable carriers, I think we're gonna have to solve this problem, or else we don't get too far, or we build something that gets appropriated in another direction altogether, which is probably worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the economics piece is key.
Mm. All right, you guys, any closing thoughts before we close for today? Or we can just say our goodbyes. Greg, sorry, as always, do you want to share real quick, like any insights from yesterday's hackalong, the Europe hackalong?
Sure. Rasan, she went through another IoT kind of explanation for her hospital data kind of master's degree project. And then what did Guillaume talked about kind of like a from what I was understanding, was using a utility token to kind of replicate
Capabilities token.
that function. Yeah. What's that?
The capabilities token.
eSWIFT, yeah, the capability.
Yeah, that I hope to catch the recording of that stuff.
Yeah,
Cool.
it was a long day too.
Sorry, Brazil?
It was 2 hours because of the red. The DM stuff's at the end.
Okay, awesome. Great, guys. Look forward to more conversations. I look forward to next week.
All right,
Thanks
take
for
care,
joining.
Sid.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Appreciate it.
Bye.